Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. Finn Bright's heart pounded in his chest as he clutched the mysterious black envelope that had been shoved under his apartment door. His life so far had been a string of petty crime as small-time cons, failed heists, and amateurish attempts at villainy. He was the kind of guy who got caught trying to rob a convenience store because he'd forgotten to take off his name tag from the part-time job he had at the same place. Being a villain wasn't easy, especially when you had a conscience that always seemed to get in the way. But this could change everything. The envelope bore a wax seal, with a symbol Finn didn't recognize at 2 cross lightning bolts over a skull. The invitation inside was simple yet chilling: Villain Training Academy, where legends are made. Your acceptance is required. Report immediately. Finn had heard rumors about such a place, but like most things in his life, he'd never thought he'd actually be part of it. Legends spoke of an elite school hidden deep in the universe, where the galaxy's most notorious villains had been trained. It was said that if you survived the training, you came out as one of the most feared figures in the cosmos. His hand trembled slightly as he packed his meager belongings, stuffing his old utility belt into a bag and double-checking the route. The location was given as Sectors 8 and 9. An asteroid cluster at the far edge of known space. Few dared venture out there, but Finn's cheap and old, rusted freighter he'd acquired during one of his failed schemes was up for the journey. It had to be. As the engines whirred to life, the freighter shuddered but held together. Finn sat at the controls, trying to suppress the doubt creeping into his mind. What if this was a mistake? What if he wasn't cut out for this? He shook his head. No. This was his shot. He'd never be taken seriously as a villain unless he took risks. This was just another step in becoming the galaxy's greatest supervillain, assuming he didn't screw it up like every other time. The journey through space was long and tedious. Finn kept himself busy by practicing his evil laugh in the cockpit mirror. Mwahaha, he intoned, though it sounded more like a nervous hiccup than a maniacal cackle. He sighed. Gotta work on that. After what seemed like days of flying through asteroid fields and dodging space debris, Finn finally reached his destination. The Academy stood out starkly against the blackness of space. A giant, fortress-like structure built into an asteroid, with ominous red lights blinking around the perimeter. Massive metal spikes jutted out from its surface, and the entrance looked like the maw of some great beast, ready to swallow anyone foolish enough to approach. Finn swallowed hard, gripping the controls tightly. He eased the freighter into the docking bay, his hands shaking slightly. As the ship clanked into place, the docking doors hissed open, and a cold, metallic voice echoed through the comm system. Welcome, future villain, prepare to begin your journey to infamy. Finn's stomach churned as he stepped off the ship, glancing around nervously. The docking bay was eerily silent, save for the distant hum of machinery. A figure approached, a tall, menacing robot clad in black armor. Its face was an expressionless metal mask, its eyes glowing a deep red. Finn Bright, the robot droned. You have been chosen to attend the Villain Training Academy. Follow me. Finn nodded mutely, clutching his bag as he followed the robot down a series of dark corridors. The walls were lined with portraits of notorious villains' names Finn had only heard in whispers. Lord Havoc, Mistress Malady, the dreaded Scourgia, figures who had terrorized the galaxy for decades. Their faces stared down at him, each more malevolent than the last. Eventually, the robot led him to a massive set of doors, which creaked open to reveal a large hall filled with other aspiring villains. Finn's eyes widened as he took in the scene. There were all kinds of tall, muscular brutes with scars and tattoos, sleek, shadowy figures lurking in the corners, and even a few who looked like they could have been scientists or mad inventors. Attention, students! A booming voice rang out. Finn turned to see a towering figure standing on a raised platform at the front of the hall. Dressed in flowing black robes, with a sharp, angular face and eyes that gleamed with malice, the figure commanded the room with ease. I am Headmaster Blackthorn, And you are the future scourge of the universe. The headmaster's voice was like ice, sending chills down Finn's spine. You are here because you wish to be more than mere criminals. You seek to become true villains, the masters of chaos, terror, and domination. But only the strongest, the smartest, and the most cunning will succeed. The rest of you will fail, miserably. Finn gulped. The headmaster's gaze swept across the room, landing briefly on Finn before moving on. Your journey begins now. Welcome to Villain Training Academy. Finn was assigned a room deep within the academy's labyrinthine halls. It wasn't much, a small, cramped space with a bed, a desk, and a single window that looked out into the black void of space. As he unpacked, he wondered what kind of challenges awaited him. He had no delusions of grandeur. He knew he wasn't like the others. Most of these people had probably already done terrible things, committed heinous crimes. Finn? He'd barely managed to shoplift without getting caught. But as he lay on his bed that night, staring up at the metal ceiling, Finn made a promise to himself. He would try his best. Maybe, just maybe, he could find his place here. The next morning, classes began. Finn shuffled into the classroom, trying to blend into the back. The other students were already seated, some looking bored, others eager. The first instructor, a man with a wild mane of silver hair and an unsettling grin, strode into the room. Welcome, future evildoers, he announced. I am Professor Malice, and today we begin with the basics. The evil laugh. The room erupted in various attempts at evil laughter. Some were deep and throaty, others high-pitched and maniacal. Finn's turn came, and he could feel the pressure building. He took a deep breath and let out a half-hearted mwahaha, which quickly devolved into a nervous giggle. The class burst into laughter, not the evil kind, just regular, mocking laughter. Finn's face flushed red as Professor Malice raised an eyebrow. That a broken bar needs work, the professor said dryly. But fear not, young villain, for greatness lies in practice. Next. Over the next few days, Finn continued to struggle through the lessons. There was a class on designing fiendish plots, taught by Dr. Doomington, a short, rotund man who seemed to delight in the intricacies of overly complex schemes. Remember, Dr. Doomington would say, a proper villain's plot should be convoluted enough that the hero must struggle to understand it, but simple enough that they can eventually foil it. There's an art to leaving just enough clues behind. Finn's plot ideas, however, never seemed to stick. He'd spend hours trying to come up with something sinister, but his mind kept drifting to helpful ideas. One day, he accidentally designed a system that would help space travelers avoid asteroids. Another time, he created a plan to distribute free food to underprivileged colonies, or by mistake, of course. Then there was Master Shadow's class on stealth and escape. Finn had always been clumsy, but this class seemed to highlight just how bad he was at sneaking around. Master Shadow, a lithe, ninja-like figure, demonstrated the art of slipping into the shadows and disappearing in plain sight. When Finn tried, he tripped over his own cape, knocking over a stack of training dummies. But it wasn't all bad. Finn found a friend in Mac the Menace, a large, bumbling student with a heart of gold and a brain full of bad ideas. Mac was the kind of guy who could crush a boulder with his bare hands but couldn't intimidate a kitten. The two bonded over their shared incompetence, often practicing their evil laughs together in the academy courtyard. Then there was Viola Darkshade. Tall, sleek, and utterly terrifying, Viola was everything Finn wasn't. She exuded confidence and ambition, and her villainous instincts were razor sharp. Where Finn struggled to design even a halfway decent scheme, Viola could come up with complex plots that would make the galaxy tremble. Naturally, she hated Finn. You don't belong here, she'd hiss at him during lunch, her eyes flashing with disdain. You're not even trying. Finn wanted to argue, but deep down, he knew she wasn't entirely wrong. He was trying, but something about the whole being evil thing just didn't come naturally to him. As the weeks wore on, the Academy's tests became more intense. The students were given missions as simulations where they had to enact their villainous plans and defeat holographic heroes. Each time, Finn found himself floundering, often accidentally helping the heroes instead of thwarting them. In one particularly embarrassing simulation, Finn was supposed to steal a priceless artifact from a heavily guarded vault. Instead, he accidentally tripped the alarm and ended up guiding the heroes straight to the artifact's hiding place. Finn couldn't believe his luck, or rather, the sheer lack of it, as the simulation shut down, the artifact safely in the hands of the holographic heroes. The rest of the class stood around him, most shaking their heads in disbelief, some openly snickering. Viola's icy voice cut through the crowd. "You're a joke, Finn. You'll never make it past the first semester," she sneered, her lips curling into a cruel smile. Finn sighed and made his way out of the simulation chamber, his head hanging low. He didn't belong here. Every mission, every test, every challenge, he was failing miserably, and not just in the way villains were supposed to fail. Villains failed with style, with flair. They had setbacks but bounced back stronger. Finn just fumbled, tripped, and, worse, accidentally helped the very heroes he was meant to outwit. Back in his room, he collapsed onto his small, uncomfortable bed, staring up at the ceiling, the weight of the Academy's pressure crushing him. He was trying his best, but no matter how hard he worked at being evil, he couldn't shake the part of him that wanted to make things right. And in this place, making things right wasn't exactly a selling point. Days turned into weeks, and the final exam loomed. Finn's stomach twisted with anxiety. This wasn't like the smaller tests where his mistakes had merely embarrassed him. This was the culmination of everything the Academy had taught them. He didn't even want to imagine what might happen if he failed the final. As the day approached, the Academy's mood shifted. Philo was practically glowing with confidence. Even Mac, bumbling as he was, had some faith that he could at least make it out in one piece. But Finn? He felt like he was walking into certain doom. The exam was simple in theory. Each student would face a series of challenges, all set in a simulated city filled with heroes, civilians, and traps. Their job was to take over the city, destroy the heroes, and emerge victorious by any means necessary. Finn arrived at the simulation chamber, the enormous doors towering above him like the jaws of some massive beast ready to swallow him whole. The other students stood in line, some fidgeting nervously, others looking like they were ready to conquer the universe. Headmaster Blackthorn appeared before them, his sharp eyes surveying the group with a mixture of expectation and disappointment. He never said it outright, but Finn knew he was one of the disappointments. "The time has come," Blackthorn intoned, his voice booming. "This is your moment to prove yourself. For those who succeed, greatness awaits. For those who fail, Broken Bar." His eyes flicked briefly to Finn. Broken Bar, there is no place for you here." Finn swallowed hard. His palms were sweaty as he stepped into the simulation room. The doors closed behind him with a hiss, leaving him standing alone in what appeared to be a dark alleyway. The simulation was eerily real. The city stretched out before him, skyscrapers looming over the streets, holographic civilians milling about, unaware of the chaos that was about to unfold. Somewhere in the city, the heroes were waiting, ready to foil whatever plan he came up with. "Okay, Finn," he muttered to himself. "You've got this. Just a broken bar, don't mess it up." He didn't have a real plan, of course. All the other students had spent weeks meticulously crafting their strategies, but Finn had always been more of a wing it kind of guy, mostly because every time he tried to plan something, it turned into a disaster. He started by sneaking through the alleyways, trying to stay out of sight. He knew he didn't have the firepower or the brain power to face the heroes head on, so stealth was his only option. Master Shadow's voice echoed in his head, "Disappear. Become one with the darkness." Finn chuckled nervously to himself. He was terrible at disappearing. His footsteps echoed off the alley walls, and twice he stumbled over a trash can, cursing under his breath. But he kept moving. The goal was to find the city's power grid, take it down, and plunge the place into chaos. At least, that was the plan. As Finn crept closer to his target, he could hear the sounds of the other students engaging in battle elsewhere in the city. Explosions rocked the streets, and beams of light shot up into the simulated sky. He imagined Violet in the middle of it all, cold and calculating, executing her master plan with surgical precision. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the end of the alleyway. A hero. Finn's heart raced. He ducked behind a stack of crates, watching as the hero scanned the area, looking for signs of trouble. Finn held his breath, trying to remain as still as possible. The hero, a holographic representation of a galactic peacekeeper, paused for a moment, his gaze lingering in Finn's direction. Finn could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." Then, in a stroke of what could only be described as pure, dumb luck, the hero turned and walked away. Finn let out a sigh of relief, wiping the sweat from his brow. He continued moving through the city, doing his best to avoid any more encounters. At last, he reached the power grid, a massive structure that controlled the city's energy supply. Finn stared at it, trying to remember the sabotage techniques Dr. Doomington had taught in class. He opened a panel and began fiddling with the wires, muttering to himself. Red to blue, no, the broken bar. Blue to green, a broken bar. His hands shook as he worked, trying not to think about how badly this could go. Then, without warning, the grid sparked and sputtered. The lights in the city flickered, then went out completely. Finn stood there in the darkness, blinking in disbelief. "I'd a broken bar," he whispered, half expecting the simulation to glitch and tell him he'd failed. But the city remained dark, and the sounds of chaos began to rise in the distance. Finn had actually done something right. The success, however, was short-lived. As soon as the grid went down, alarms blared, and the simulation's heroes sprang into action. Finn could hear them closing in on his location. Panic set in. He had no plan, no backup, and no idea how to escape. His mind raced as he tried to remember Master Shadow's lessons on evasion, but nothing came. All he could think of was the inevitable failure that would follow when the heroes found him cowering in the corner. And then, inspiration struck. Finn grabbed a discarded cloak from a nearby crate, draping it over his shoulders. He hunched his back, covered his face, and shuffled out of the alleyway as if he were just another civilian. The heroes rushed past him, their attention focused on finding the villain responsible for the blackout. They didn't give him a second glance. He had escaped. Finn couldn't believe it. He had just pulled off the perfect getaway without even trying. But he wasn't done yet. There was still one last part of the exam, the final showdown. The heroes had regrouped at the city's central plaza, and Finn knew he couldn't avoid them forever. He crept toward the plaza, his heart pounding in his chest. When he arrived, he saw the other students already engaged in battle. Violet was there, of course, standing at the center of it all, directing the chaos with ruthless efficiency. She had the heroes on the ropes, her minions closing in for the kill. Finn's mind raced. He knew there was no way he could beat Violet or the other students head on. But maybe, just maybe, there was another way to win. As he watched the battle unfold, an idea formed in his mind. It was crazy, but it just might work. He snuck around the edge of the plaza, avoiding the main conflict. In the chaos, no one noticed him slipping into the shadows. From his vantage point, he could see the simulation's control panel, a glowing console that controlled the entire city's holographic systems. Finn grinned. If he couldn't win the fight, he'd just have to change the rules. He sprinted toward the console, his heart pounding in his ears. Alarms blared as the system registered his tempering, but Finn didn't stop. He pressed every button he could find, reprogramming the simulation on the fly. The city around him shimmered, and then the holographic landscape shifted. The heroes disappeared, replaced by a broken bar. Nothing. The battle stopped, the other students looking around in confusion. "What's happening?" Violet demanded, her voice cutting through the silence. And then Finn stepped forward, grinning like an idiot. "Game over," he said, holding up the control panel's override key. The simulation ended. The room went dark, then slowly filled with the sound of slow, mocking applause. Headmaster Blackthorn stepped into the room, his expression unreadable. "Finn Bright," he said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of final judgment. Finn gulped. This was it. The end. "You have done something no student has ever attempted," Blackthorn continued, his gaze narrowing. "You broke the simulation." Finn blinked, unsure whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. Blackthorn paused for a long moment before a small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Congratulations, Finn. You've succeeded a broken bar in the most unconventional way possible." Finn stood there, stunned. He had won. Somehow, against all odds, he had passed the final exam. Viola glared at him, her fists clenched in fury, but Finn didn't care. For the first time since arriving at the academy, he felt like he belonged. As the other students filed out of the room, Headmaster Blackthorn approached Finn. "You're not like the others," he said quietly. "That much is clear. But sometimes, it takes a different kind of villain to change the universe." Finn nodded, still not quite believing what had just happened. He was a villain now, a real one. But as he left the academy that day, diploma in hand, Finn couldn't help but smile to himself. He might be the galaxy's kindest villain, but he was a villain nonetheless. And that was good enough for him.